snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books.
Hi guys! So I am here today to review 3 YA and children's fantasy books for you, so let's get started. The first one I have to talk to you about is The Gracekeepers by Kirsty Logan, which is a YA fantasy read. This is a redeeming book for me because I have read one other thing by Kirsty Logan in the past, which was her short story collection called A Portable Shelter. It was really imaginative, but none of the ideas paid off, and I really felt like so many of the ideas were good, but if they had been a full-length novel, they'd have been really good, whereas in this, it is a full-length novel, and I do think the ideas paid off, and I think she did really well writing this, and I really enjoyed it. We have 2 different cultures. We have the landlockers, who are people who live on the land, and we have the damplings, who are people who live on the water, because this world is largely flooded, and there are just small islands of people living on the islands. So we have one main character called North. This is North on the front cover. She is part of a circus, and she is the bear trainer within the circus. And then we have another main character called Callanish, and Callanish is a gracekeeper. She lives out on the water on her own, and people come to her when someone has died for her to perform the last graces, and it's basically like a funeral ceremony. She kind of conducts their funeral. So the 2 girls don't know each other at all. We follow each of their stories individually, and then as time goes on, we do see them intersect. And it's a very beautiful book. I wouldn't say the writing is particularly lyrical, but I would say it has some good moments to it. I really enjoyed the relationship between North and her bear, and she definitely had a real connection to the bear, and she looked after him and she was there for him when no one else really cared about him. It was just entertainment and attraction. She works in a circus, and this is a travelling circus who travel around, and at the point where we pick up the story, all we know is that North is hiding something. She's part of this circus, she's very happy there with her bear, but she's hiding something, and some of the other people on the crew know what it is, but most of them don't, and she's kind of trying to keep this mostly to herself, because if she gets discovered and if what she has as a secret is found out, she will probably be disgraced. Callanish has a history with her mother. She and her mother have this history of not really getting along and having problems, and now she is separated from her mother and unable to see her. She misses her. She's on her own most of the time. Being a gracekeeper is not the most glamorous or wonderful or exciting of careers, but she really misses her mother, and by coincidence these 2 girls end up meeting, and they have this connection, an instant connection to one another, and that kind of changes the course of both their lives. Both of them have been settled in their lives but not happy, and now when they meet each other they sort of find out that they need to be happy, they need to change up things, do things for themselves, and I really enjoyed that sort of element of the book. Definitely liked this. I thought it was a great solid read, easy to get through, one that I really liked, but it wasn't mind-blowing or amazing. It was just a beautiful little book, and that was all it was to me. I ended up giving it a 3.5 out of 5 stars because I did really like some of the writing moments, and I really liked some of the character moments, and it didn't end up quite where I was expecting, although some of it's predictable, some of it's not, so I like that there were a few things I didn't manage to anticipate. Overall, it's a very solid, very likeable read, one I would certainly say check out if it appeals to you. The next one I have to talk to you guys about is called Dealing with Dragons, and this is by Patricia C. Reed. I have never heard of this series until very recently. It is the Enchanted Forest Chronicles series, and this is book number 1. It is a middle grade or children's series, and I was recommended this by Giselle, whose channel is Giselle Bradley. I will link it down below, so go and check her out. She reads a lot more middle grade than I do, and she was particularly singing the praises of this one. So, of course, when I found out it had dragons and it was a middle grade, and I haven't read much middle grade recently and I wanted to, I thought, you know what, definitely one that I wanted to pick up. So I did, and I'm so happy that I did, because this was just really entertaining, like so entertaining to read. We follow a young princess called Cimarine, and Cimarine hates her life. She's kind of in a bad situation where she doesn't like being a princess, and yet she is one, and everyone expects her to act like a princess should act. Everyone thinks that she should smile when people smile at her. They think that she should be quite happy practicing sewing and curtsies and dancing and not doing adventurous crazy things like fencing and cooking and thinking outside of the box. None of that is very princess-like. So unfortunately, Cimarine does not thrive in the environment of a palace, being a princess, waiting for her prince. She hates it. She wants to get out. And so when she finds out that there is a plot from her parents to marry her off, she decides enough is enough. She needs to leave the palace and get out. And what she does is she goes to live with some dragons. And I have to say, this is one of the most funny, amusing, wonderful influences on young children that I could recommend to you, particularly young females. A lot of the time in fairy tales we have the princess waiting for her prince and she's very reliant on the man in her life, and this is completely not that. This flips every trope of fairy tales on its head in a really great way. It shows you a young princess who can think for herself, who is intelligent, who is witty, who is funny, who is able to go out and get things done, and is a brilliant asset to whoever she decides to befriend, and they are grateful to have her in their lives, not the other way round. She's not reliant on anyone else, she's very much her own person, and she is just a fantastic one. I loved her. The adventure within this is simplistic because it is for children, but the character and the way that the tropes are flipped made me so happy. I was smiling throughout reading this. I really, really enjoyed it, and I was so happy that Giselle had recommended it to me. It is a series, so of course I will be picking up the other ones in the series sometime very soon. But I will say, if you've got a young daughter, or if you just like reading middle grade or children's fiction, please pick this one up. It is wonderful. More people need to read it because I'd never heard of it, and yet it's fabulous. So I actually ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars overall, which is pretty exciting for a middle grade book that I'd never heard of, so definitely recommend this one. And the final one that I have to mention to you guys is Emperor of the Eight Islands. This is by Leanne Hearn, and this is a YA series. It is set in the same world as her Tales of a Tory series, so if you've ever read that, this is set in the same world. This one is set many, many, many years before the Tales of a Tory. I would say that this reads like a book that anyone could read. It's very simple in the writing style, but the adventure and the plot is fast-paced and it's fun, and it's really fun throughout the whole thing. It definitely has vibes of Oriental culture, so if you're interested at all in Asia or Japan or any of the countries over that side of the world that you may potentially have visited, but probably more likely you haven't, and you're like me and you dream of one day going there, this is a great way to kind of get that fix of Oriental-inspired fiction, because it does have a lot of tribal influence from ancient Asia and things like that, so it's really, really cool. We follow a couple of different characters in this, and it's set in a world 300 years before the Atori story, where people rule in courts, they live in the wilderness, in like forests, in little shacks, and magic in this world is very, very much alive. We follow many different big dynasties and families that are ever reaching across the whole of this place, and big families that all connect to each other with feuds and with treaties and politics. And there are all sorts of plots going on for who is going to be the emperor of this world. This book is actually 2 books, so we have The Emperor of the Eight Islands is 1 book, and then the second story within this is The Autumn Princess. It's just a bind-up edition of the first 2 in the series, but they are follow-on. It's not like they're 2 separate stories, they completely just follow one straight into the other. Characters that we're following in this story are Shikanoko, who is a young man who is thought to have been killed by his family, and no one actually believes he's alive so that he would not take over the seat. But instead of being killed when he is shot at, he actually manages to land on top of a deer, convenient, and he survives, and he goes and lives with a sorcerer, and he learns the ways of magic from this sorcerer in the woods. We also follow a young character called Yoshi, who is actually the new emperor after the old one is killed. He is very young though, he is just a child, and he doesn't really know anything about who he has to be or the expectations and the horrible situation that he's going to have to walk into when he is grown up, so he is often travelling with other people. Aki, or Akai, is the Autumn Princess, that's her name, and she is basically helping Yoshi to get away from the situation, to hide until he is of age, or at least of an age to go and claim back his throne, which has been taken by evil other people in the story. And we have Hina, who is a young character whose family is wiped out by the horribleness of this world and the constant warring between families. So she ends up living with an older man who takes a liking to her and kind of adopts her as like his adoptive daughter, and she lives in his household. And while she's there, she actually finds out a lot of interesting stuff that she then acts upon later in the book. Those are the 4 characters that really stood out to me most out of the book. I think that there are some other characters too who are interesting, but those 4 were the ones that I most enjoyed. The magic in this book is what really raised the rating up for me, because I think that the characters need a bit more development, and I think hopefully that will come in the final 2 books in the series. But the magic is so cool. We have like shadow babies being born, which is creepy as can be, and they have like insane powers. We have sorcerers and sorceresses who are always involved in the storyline. We have masks that give you magical powers so you can chat to people from miles away. It's kind of like a crazy load of magic in this, and there's no real explanation behind the magic. It's just, this is a world where magic is a thing, and I like that sometimes, to just be chucked into a world where magic is just a thing and these things happen, and magic because magic, and it's really, really fun. It leaves a lot of potential for like crazy escapades to take place, and that definitely is the case with this. If you like the sound of kind of warring Oriental inspired dynasties with big plots about empires going on and also lots of crazy magic, you might well enjoy this, and I really, really did. I ended up giving this a 4 out of 5 stars overall. It was so likeable, so easy to get into, super quick read, and one that I really enjoyed. So I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've read it, or if you haven't and you're interested, let me know that down below. Same goes for the previous 2 that I just talked about, Dealing with Dragons and The Gracekeepers. Let me know your thoughts on them too. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.